The fifth pick in the NBA draft, to my best recollection, was Ace Bailey. Sorry. Yes. And Ace Bailey, um, I'll just go straight off the notes for him too. Um, the title of my Ace Bailey recollection is Ace Bailey, I'm sorry. And a lot of people who would have that title on their draft notes, it would be saying, "Hey, Ace Bailey, I'm a stat nerd, and I and I should have been more mindful. And you're really better than what I said you were when I ranked you, outside of the lottery, or outside of the top 10, wherever you ranked him." That's not why I'm apologizing to Ace Bailey at all. Actually, though, I think that 26. That's where I had him, right. 26th player in the draft, which comes with means like I don't really think that he's going to be a positively influential basketball player even at his peak. Maybe maybe a neutral at his peak, like Max. And a neutral peak is something that you can get from a player with much less draft equity. That you would use much less draft equity to obtain. Ace Bailey, I'm sorry not for evaluating you incorrectly, because I didn't. I instead apologize for the way that your game. I'm gonna talk to him in the first person as if we're having a conversation. Ace Bailey, I apologize that you are going to have to bear the load of a culture war in prospect analysis that you have nothing to do with at all, other than the fact that your play style reminds people of reminds a select group of people of when they were in high school themselves, when people shot 100 and how many mid-range jump shots did he shoot in the season last year? Okay, I don't know why that's so small. It says 200. Jesus Christ. Um, yeah, exactly 200 non-rim twos in a season with a 33-point rate. Some people used to like that more than they do now. I don't think that it's ever, or I think that it very rarely ends with a player being a positive impact on their team and in the team building experience. So I apologize to Ace Bailey for that, in that that he picked his agency, and it made him look crazy, and they created such a poor optical situation for him that when he fails on the court, people are going to blame it on all of these things other than beyond the fact that instead he actually just is not a player whose process on the court period is going to be sustainable and in a team atmosphere. The issues, I think Ace Bailey is another player who's similar to Jabari Parker. We mentioned Jabari Parker earlier when we were talking about Cooper Flag, and Jabari Parker was not a very good NBA player at his peak. He was injured and also just like very, very unimpactful on both ends, really, because to not do anything other than score, you actually have to be the most efficient and effective scorer, and Jabari Parker was below that, as well as just being a very poor defender as well, who had really bad uh, rebounding influence, actually. Most importantly, though, their shot diets. The most important query for Ace Bailey, if you were trying to isolate him for players who I believe will or have had similar struggles as him in the league, is a sub 0.75 assist to turnover ratio from a player who attempted at least 180 non-rim two attempts and at least 75 three-pointers, which I believe just filters out like bigs. I'm not exactly sure. and then had at least 5 dunks, maybe just to only have kind of wing-sized players as opposed to like small guards. This play style sucks. Shooting all of those mid-range shots and having to turn them into three-pointers as a pro, especially if the only thing that you're actually good at is shooting threes. I mean, it's shooting non-rim twos, which is itself not an efficient shot unless it's a counter that you could find yourself passing out of. With the low passing field that Ace Bailey has exhibited, he's not going to be able to parlay his shot diet into creating open opportunities for his teammates. And I struggle also with the fact that he is pretty small to play what his best position is, which is an off-ball forward, like basically the same thing Lauri Markkanen does now on the same team. But Lauri Markkanen was 7 foot 240 at the same age, where Ace Bailey is, let's call him 6'10". I believe it's 190 that that he plays at, or that he measured at the combine, and that's just too small. So even his solid offensive rebounding numbers at Rutgers, I'm a bit nervous about how he's going to crash the glass in the league playing. And he can't play the three because there's no playmaking value, especially at the three. He becomes like one of like the most like low field, just no chance to be a positive offensive influence at the three. So at the four, how is he gonna still play defense? At the three, I think he would actually be fine on defense and on the glass, but that opportunity is not really gonna present itself all that much. He doesn't draw fouls or get to the free throw line to the degree where we're going to be getting like any good offensive 2-point process or scoring from two as well. It's this, he's a better mid-range shooter than Cooper Flag, but like making the mid-range shots isn't what really makes a player's offensive process that good. We saw this with Bub Carrington last year. It doesn't matter if you're good at shooting them, if that's it. And Bub Carrington, his even came with like passing and handle and stuff, but also like he's just so bad. His process is like way worse than Ace Bailey's. He's smaller. There's way more issues, but it's on the same path where if that is your main, like if that's the main thing you want to do on offense is shoot an off the dribble mid-range jump shot, you're not gonna make it. Ace also, he's pretty contact diverse, especially to be as big as he is. Once again, messes with the positional versatility that he has, especially because he cannot play any position where there's any playmaking demands. I don't think it's gonna work. I believe at this point, anybody who was as low on him as I was is probably tucked their tail and moved him up retroactively. I'm probably the lowest on Ace Bailey, like who's gonna stand on it, or from that I've seen at least, and I just don't believe that it's gonna work out for him. Once again, really unfortunately for him, he seems like a very nice young man, and I don't want him to fail to any degree at all. That it's going to make me disappointed that he's been propped up in all these situations. The only thing that could help him is that the Utah Jazz, and since Will Hardy got there, Lauri Markkanen is like the perfect example of how to maximize this. But also check Lauri Markkanen's stats since, man, we're getting 2 Talen Horton-Tucker references. Since Talen Horton-Tucker left last season, Lauri Markkanen turned into like a super regular player with like middling scoring efficiency, no playmaking at all. So if it takes a playmaker to spoon feed you all of your baskets, no matter what your shooting skill is, which Ace Bailey's shooting skill, because I was about to say he doesn't get to the free throw line and he also can't really shoot free throws, which makes his actual shooting ability and skill even more in question. It's not gonna happen. It's not gonna work out for my boy, man, and it's unfortunate. I hate it. I hate it for him. All right, next slide. I might have ranked Tre Johnson actually a little bit too high, and I'll explain why here. Having him 14th in the class, yeah, I might have had him a couple spots high. Like Tre Johnson versus Jace Richardson, I'll probably lean Jace now as opposed to where I leaned Tre before the draft, and that is because I think I overrated Tre Johnson as an athlete, and I can explain it. Before he measured at the combine, like preseason even, the the sentiment was that, I think that's how you say sentiment. I think that's the way you use it. Is that he had a 7 foot wingspan, and he actually only has a 6'10" wingspan, which is like +5. And a +5 wingspan is like regular long. It's not like, oh man, this you're gonna be able to play defense because your arms are long, even though you can't guard at all. It's not that. His defensive markers in college were really low. In Anatomy of a Missed Layup, I had a query that I pulled proving something. It was like to the degree of, I don't really remember what the point was. If you read Anatomy of a Missed Layup, you'll see the query usage 26.5% and blocks under 1 block%, under 2 steal%. And it's a bunch of NBA players who, like Colin Sexton, Doug McDermott, guys who did the spreadsheets that is, do not like really at all. A bunch of guys with like negative career RAPMs, like massively negative, like harmfully negative, especially to take with the 6th pick. And I think Tre Johnson is better than all these players. Like Cam Thomas is the best one, and that's not a RAPM guy. The only, well, like EPM is the stat where, offensive EPM, excuse me, because if you use the full number, then he just turns into like a 60th percentile player in the league, which is still, I guess, kind of okay, but not really for the 6th pick as much, but it could still work. But also Cam Thomas is like bigger too, so I don't think he'll ever guard. I think he's just like too far away on defense, but at least he has weight on his side like Khan. I think Tre Johnson is better than all those prospects though. Yeah, see, in my notes I said that he had an elite positional wingspan, and that's not true. So this is the first time in these notes that a foundational part of my ranking is going to be incorrect, and that I'm going to retroactively speak on here. Nah, he's just like a regular, like, okay size 2. 37-inch vert. It's like pretty good, but once again, like, it's not a 40-inch vert. It's okay. So we're working with like a decent frame. 190 pounds is like, it's not happening for Tre Johnson. For Jeremiah Fears and Egor Demin, I'll run through these pretty quick, and then I have a note on all three. As for Fears, as a 2026 prospect, I would have been much more interested, and he would still be the same age because he reclassed up a year as most of the other prospects in his class. In the 2025 draft, he is unfortunately nowhere near equipped to play the most taxing role on a permanent basis in American sports, with that being the point guard, primary initiator position, especially at his size. He actually measured really poorly, like his wingspan and like his build he has a really trash build. The The positive case for Jeremiah Fears is that he's like a really accurate free throw shooter and that he's really young. And and he gets a lot of steals. But there's there's nothing else at all. Like no scoring accuracy, especially in conference play. I don't know how you could draft someone who played how he did in conference play in the first round, and they took him seventh or eighth. It was genuinely a very bad draft pick. It should set that team back pretty far. The Pelicans. I don't think Jeremiah Fears really has a chance, especially like he. It's not crazy to assume he'll be the worst player in the league his rookie year, and if we assume only like incremental, like normal age curve incremental improvements moving forward, I think he'll be starting from a really really low place. Like the floor is hell, and the ceiling can only be like the ground. So Jeremiah Fears, I believe, if I have this correctly, he's the worst pick in the lottery, tied for his second, and one of the worst picks in the entire draft. So that's unfortunate for Jeremiah Fears. Egor Demin, my notes on him were pretty reductive because when I was going through the process of narrowing down the actual draft field and players that I needed to take time with and spend time with their profiles so that I could properly create something like the master notes in this video and all of my ideas that I presented in real time leading up to the draft. He didn't he never interested me because early in the season when he was playing against the University of Idaho and he was, making shots, getting his game off, but I knew that I don't respect Q4 bullies. That's the terminology I use for players who only are good when they're playing against nobody, and when they play against better competition, their abilities or they're much less productive. BYU is like one of the easiest team constructs. It's actually crazy that I don't believe that the staff, when the coach left from there and went to Kentucky, Mark Pope, I believe is his name, and they got a new coach like from somewhere else. I don't think he was just like promoted off their staff, but their offense was still like insanely optimized and effective and like really good and easy to play in for the players. And Mr. Egor Demin still struggled pretty massively. My most dearest friend, my GOAT, the best draft analyst that there is, Avi, he released a very very just in depth, this amazing piece on Egor Demin, and he ended up kind of explaining the way that his projection ladder, how reaching the top of it would occur, and under the circumstances that it works out, my placement would look really bad for having him, 28th, I believe, on my board. But I think Avi is just so skilled and talented at writing and explaining his ideas that it could have come across that he was actually like promoting and saying like, yeah, Egor Demin is this good and that he should be picked that high. And that's actually not really what it says. I went back and read it, and it's more just understanding that that he actually has a little bit of a stronger baseline than I personally accounted for, at least, and the way that baseline paired with some of the outlier traits that Demin has could lead to him outperforming his slot, like actually being a point guard or sustaining point guard playmaking usage at his size with the shooting volume that he was able to sustain is actually very useful. But I still don't think that he hits the baseline that a player requires to even get to the point where his the rest of these skills and traits are become amplified. Like even in summer league, and I don't know about what he did in preseason. I didn't pay attention to any Nets preseason, but he just bombed threes to the point where there was no playmaking. There was nothing else. It was just shoot threes and be tall, and that can only be so valuable. It's like not really all that valuable at all, actually. Cool. And then finally on this, fundamentally disagree with all three of these picks and the idea of using premium draft slots with little to no risk aversion accounted for. These players, it was like all risk, no reward, or all risk, all reward. In short, without a very solid foundation, boom or bust drafting is irresponsible, as the bust becomes more likely with no insulation or synergy boosts with otherwise talented players, while being more costly of a miss, as the player's hypothetical optimized peak won't likely ever exist, especially with their draft team, which will happen in their youngest 4 or 5 years in the league, moving on to another team and into a different situation after they've already underperformed is more likely than them staying with the same team for 6 or 7 years and eventually figuring it out. An attempt to draft synergistic talents to pair with a 21-year-old that's yet to demonstrate the required successes is a difficult moving target. So basically trying to build around Tre Johnson or Jeremiah Fears or Egor Demin or Ace Bailey or anybody else. No, really them. If you try to build around them while they're not actually good, then you're just setting yourself up for a predicament. That because it's impossible, because you can't say, oh, this player would be good with this player when that player's not even good at all. Collin Murray-Boyles. How do I say this? I had when I posted my first board, I had a note. One of the homies asked. He was like, "What's wrong with Collin Murray-Boyles? Why is he so low?" I thought he was, he didn't really say any of this, but he's like, "Hey, like, why is he so low?" And other people had him. Some people had him up at 2 in this class. The issue that I found while messing around in my shot, I had when I posted my first board, I had a note. One of the homies asked. He was like, "What's wrong with Collin Murray-Boyles? Why is he so low?" I thought he was, he didn't really say any of this, but he's like, "Hey, like, why is he so low?" And other people had him. Some people had him up at 2 in this class. The issue that I found while messing around in my shot diet sheet is that rim dependent scorers that don't dunk their rim attempts don't have the easiest offensive translation. Collin Murray-Boyles is a very rim reliant finisher. He's is like a little bit on the lower side as far as efficiency is concerned, and this is another thing like Cooper Flag where it's if your dunk rate is low because you're scoring off of drives. Well, if your dunk, well, for Cooper Flag it was his finishing, but for CMB it's his dunk rate and it's his also his finishing relative to other bigs is just mediocre. It's not like awesome. It's not really that good. But if that is the reason that you're not dunking the ball, it doesn't matter to me that much that you're driving, because somebody like Matt Powers, I think is the guy. He responded and he was like, yeah, well, he's the only one who's driving off of the people who also struggled with this similar thing, which was like Xavier Tillman, Jock Landale, who is like kind of an underrated player by the sheets. Every team he plays on, everybody hates him though. Like all the fans, they think he's the worst player, but he's actually not. Who else is it? Enrique Freeman, Jared Vanderbilt, Daron Sharp, who's like a good player but not really a very good rim finisher. if that's kind of your restriction as a big, that you have not a lot of not scoring versatility, because he does have scoring versatility, but if you can't finish at the rim, and you can only finish at the rim and it's all below the rim, then the scoring translation can be kind of rough. Other than that, CMB is an elite defensive prospect. He measured taller than I thought he would. I honestly thought he was going to measure like 6'6" with no shoes, but he actually ended up having like a pretty good wingspan and standing, like an okay wingspan and standing reach. He's like very like thick. Has great defensive feel. Basically, all the other stuff that any other person could tell you from the nerd perspective on why he was so high. But when we're evaluating players, I have found my most success in, instead of amplifying or harping on a player's most positive traits, you end up having a better understanding of what makes a player good and bad when you begin to chop them down into what they can't do. And this sounds terrible. This sounds like some real hating ass shit. But if you continue to attempt to chop down a tree and it never falls, then you know that you found the strongest tree in the forest. And that was some real shit I just said. And that's kind of my process, and how I couldn't get too much higher with Collin Murray-Boyles than the ninth slot, which is like a good and positive, with the 10th pick in the NBA draft. The Phoenix Suns selected the number one player on the Nile Hoops draft board. I'm so excited to talk about, because maybe when I say it out loud, people understand how we got here. Khaman Maluach is the best prospect in the 2025 NBA draft class. He fulfills most if not all of the principles that I believe in projecting extremely impactful players. From the age, he's going to play I believe his whole rookie season at 19. Age, size, intersection, I'm not sure. I don't have age on hand, but I'm pretty sure he would be like an outlier, because most of the time, really big bigs like Maluach, who like have like the low passing volume and stuff like that are usually labeled as like projects or like low field stuff like that, they're always also struggle with being really, really skinny, like 200, like 10 and 20 pounds and stuff. And that ends up really being the reason that they struggle in translation early, is because they're not physically equipped to play the five. And Khaman Maluach is all but extremely capable, physically capable already at his age to play the five. My initial basis for my for the case for him is physical. It's a 113-inch standing reach. I don't know what that is. It's big though. A 23-inch standing vertical sounds really trash, but at that size, especially at 245 pounds, because that's the last part of the physical query that I used for measurements. Most of the bigs that big, they actually, like, half of them don't get over a 23-inch standing vertical. So like Maluach, like, it seems like he measured poorly, but for a player his, like, as huge as him, it was really okay. Players who have measured out this well in the NBA at the Combine historically include Zach Edey, DeMarcus Cousins, DeAndre Jordan, Brook Lopez, and Brendan Haywood back in 2001. All of these players have had this is still the career. All of these players' career RAPM was over 1, and their peaks all were within. Damn, why's it cut off? All of their RAPM peaks were like elite in the league, except Brook Lopez, which is kind of weird. Brook Lopez is probably the player who it seems like the spreadsheets would really like, but due to like no turnover, like super negative turnover influence, and not awesome offensive scoring value for his team in his over the last three, not over the last year, from his 21 to 24 3-year peak, which I believe would be when he played the most minutes, because that's how I pick out peaks, not the actual best thing. It's how whatever 3-year sample you played the most minutes over. But he was also still one of the best defensive bigs at the time, even while being an underwhelming offensive player, who we've also seen be a positive offensive player before. Brook Lopez, yeah, the sheets differ on him more than you'd think for a player who should align to be like a geek ball guy. But DeAndre Jordan, Brendan Haywood, and DeMarcus Cousins all peaked out top 30 in RAPM in the league. Zach Edey, I would never use 1 year of RAPM sample, but Zach Edey was like clearly a top, like no question, a top 100 player in the league last season, and I would probably have him higher, but I have a bias. So, Maluach. Oh, all that is already okay. Cool, all that is already there. People, players at his size and age have never been that good. Like Maluach just played the best huge person season of any 18-year-old. I mean, at least in the 21st century, and if not, we can go back and check for that. His 2-point percentage, his field goal, his free throw percentage, his turnover percentage, and his fouls per 40 were all at the top of the class in a sample with Brook Lopez, DeAndre Jordan, DeMarcus Cousins, Brendan Haywood, and Zach Edey at the same age. Jordan and Cousins were 19 in their freshman year in college, so I just used the youngest year that I could find that was relevant, because I'm not going to go back and find high school stats from. And DeMarcus Cousins, I think he played public school in high school, especially not from 2008 to 2009. That wasn't going to be the hunt that I went on for this. And Maluach just completely clears all of them. As far as his fouls are concerned, it's important to mention that I did leave out one thing in the original master notes sheet, and that is that his steal percentage is really low, and a lot of people impressed me about that at later times. And I don't actually think that it's a big deterrent on his defensive outlook, because the Duke system of defense called for him to simply deter the rim, as opposed to like block hella shots and protect the rim in that manner, as well as not taking and within deterring the rim, that's doesn't allow for a player to take a lot of gambles and try to like play passing lanes and get steals, especially when you're 7'2". I went and I found bigs who had over a 4 block percentage, under a 1.2 steal percentage, and under 4 fouls per 40 minutes, and included names like DeAndre Ayton, Kosta Koufis, Jared Allen, Isaiah Stewart, Bam Adebayo, DeAndre Jordan, and Hassan Whiteside, who all, other than Ayton, who is a very mentally weak player who has regressed not only skill-wise, but he's just become a very disappointing player based off of the prospect that he was at Arizona. But every other big on here had ranked positively in defensive RPM over their peak 3-year sample. Some of them even had at most average, and at worst, Hassan Whiteside had a pretty negative defensive turnover value or defensive turnover influence on his team over his 3-year peak. But the rest of these players, Allen, Jordan, and Adebayo, I think are like most specifically had like neutral defensive turnover influence on their team. And if you can get that while also returning very good rebounding value and very good true shooting influence, defensive true shooting influence on the team, foregoing defensive playmaking or getting steals specifically is something that I can live with. A lot of, or some of the best defensive RPM 3-year peaks on record have come from 7-footers with low defensive turnover influence. It's not a mandatory skill to be an elite defensive big. While it is useful and it seems like a good indicator of like feel and athleticism for a big to get steals, there's too much context, and the way that coaches can deploy defensive strategy simply could not allow for him to get steals at that degree and at that rate. So that's not something that should be used against him. And he's perfect in every other way. So, yep, that's how I feel. One of the most accurate scorers, insane lob threat, huge. The free throw rate is low, but I touched on that. I used Indiana because that's him and Mike Woodson and John Shire coached at. They arrived at their schools at the same time, and they put out a similar volume of NBA level bigs, and that's Jackson Davis and goddamn Killel Ware, and they also all had much higher I don't really know what I'm talking about. They all had hella high free throw rates, and that's because they ran a lot of post ups, which is I never was able to get the numbers for it, but I imagine that post ups are like the highest foul drawing play type in college basketball, at least. And Duke never posts up under John Shire, which is an issue, especially because if you recruit like the best bigs every single year, and then you don't actually let them use their largest mismatch on the offense, it puts into question exactly how effective of an offensive architect that John Shire is. Mark Williams and Derek Lively specifically had very low free throw rates for bigs, and in the league, they've both had no problem drawing fouls because they're used like regular bigs are in the NBA. And when Maluach is put into a regular NBA system, he's going to be fouled the same way. And he's going to be the best long-term player and prospect in the class. Maluach was the sole motivator to Tyrese Proctor and a large influence on Con Knippel being drafted where they were. Knippel on another team or just without Maluach at Duke wouldn't have looked nearly as good, and Proctor would have had to either transfer or go to he would have either had to transfer or like play at Duke another year. He would have had no chance in his minutes with out Maluach on the court, he was like one of the like just like not even a high major level player, honestly. That's in the draft notes. You can go check that out. Unless I like put it on the screen or something, then it'll already be there. Yep. Yeah. The Phoenix Suns. I'm a Jalen Green truther because shooting pull up 3-pointers is a great way to allow your teammates to not have offensive burdens on them. And shooting 32% on pull up threes, like he did last season, on the volume that he's shooting it, that seems like something that simply waiting for him to have better shooting seasons is more useful than like denying his that he has like a very valuable skill. And playing with Maluach, who's going to get the same amount of offensive rebounds as like Steven Adams or something around that at least. I think that I'm a Suns fan moving forward. As long as they're both on the team, those are two of my players that I like way more than everyone else. Very specifically, how is Khaman Maluach over Cooper Flagg? In short, Maluach's positional size and role efficiency are substantially more appealing than Flagg's to me. Flagg is clearly more skilled, but not skilled enough to make up for the difference in size, and also that the skill could have a slippery slope effect where he'll be put in situations where it all just stops being congruent. I already said that. I'm the only person who didn't rank Cooper Flagg 1. I'm nothing like y'all. Who's next? The 11th pick in the draft. Cedric Coward. That's who I thought it was. This was another one. I don't even have notes on him. He was my first player drafted that was in. Yeah, that wasn't in my top 3 tiers. The issue with Coward is that his draft slot was fully based on his measurements, but if a player with those measurements should have some sort of there should be some sort of indicator that they play that big when they're on the floor, and Coward had absolutely none. And he's already like he's old. Like it's not like this is like a young prospect. I believe he's 22. He's gonna play his freshman year. His rookie year, 22 years old. The ancillary skill set is very poor. He's never played against anybody. I know as much about Big Sky basketball as basically anybody, and that's not what an NBA player looks like at that level. And another way that he cancels out my beliefs and process on evaluating is that he I guess the rebounding was okay, actually. I guess the rebounding on both ends is okay, actually. But it's on low volume, and if the only way that he was an effective player is in that he just made all of his 2-point attempts and in the big and at the Big Sky level. So we never really got to test the sustainability moving up. Steal numbers are horrendous for someone with his frame and his build. You can keep the Cedric Coward, man. Also, I don't think nominative determinism helps him. Why is your name Coward? Like, I understand that's his name. He didn't pick his name or anything like that, but Coward? Why not Cedric Man? Like a man or a mouse. I gotta move on. To my number 3 prospect, who there were times this year where I wanted to actually consider him, well, after the draft actually, where I wanted to consider him being the second best prospect in the class when I was really on that Cooper Flagg hate and shit. I was like, damn, like who else can be better than Cooper Flagg? Like Khaman already did it. Maybe everybody can do it. But nah. Yeah, probably not. But at the 11th pick, 12th, Noa Essengue. I didn't write anything about Noa Essengue because once again, Avi is the most skilled and talented writer and purveyor of ideas in the NBA draft space, and there was nothing I could say that he couldn't. Um, and the case that he made was that very specifically Noa Essengue is the best athlete at his size of at his size and age that there is in basketball, as far as being as well as being extremely productive, even if the production is not in the most streamlined factors. I think that there is I guess a latent value in that he would find ways without the ability to dribble, pass, or shoot to impact the game at the level that he did. And that's something I talked about on my first podcast with Finn. I made the comparison, or that I saw the comparison that Dr. J in the 70s was the best player in basketball, like for a multi-season sample, and he couldn't dribble, pass, or shoot. But just by being the best athlete on the floor every single minute and playing to your strengths, which would be in transition, which is something that will further be amplified playing under Billy Donovan in Chicago, because they're like one of the best transition teams in basketball. I'm not a big Josh Giddey fan. I'm not a big Montas Buzelis fan. I'm not a big Kobe White fan. But these are all guys who have shown that they are like positive, or like way above average transition players. So playing them all together, Dalen Terry, they can really. There's the stylistic synergy for Noa Essengue is perfect, and I'm glad that that's where he ended up. The half court scoring is really, it doesn't really alarm me as much as it does for everybody else, because Noah is, or he has a history of being an effective offensive rebounder, along with having his assist turnover ratio is good, like pretty much consistently, and it was really good, especially early last season. But without a large playmaking burden, I'm not like, that means a little bit less to me. But being the best athlete at your size and your age, while actually being good at basketball, or having feel, even if not being like majorly skilled, I believe that we're looking at someone who is going to consistently have positive team influence, maybe neutral team influence, or like slight positive in like scoring on offense, and yeah, just a slight positive influence on offense, and then like a major positive on defense, and this is like early, and then later it would, as his skill set develops and he's able to develop a passable catch and shoot 3-pointer, and be one of the best transition players in basketball. I believe that he'll be able to sustain no lower than the range. He wouldn't make it out of like the bottom, out of the top 5. I would rather have him long term than my guy Cogburner at 6. And then if everything really goes well, the ability to shoot jump shots develops at a higher degree than like I guess above average, then yeah, I guess he probably could end up being the best player in the class. Extremely unlikely, or I mean, I guess pretty extremely unlikely, yeah. But Yeah, Noa Essengue is about as good as it gets if you just want to draft like a pure athlete. I When Derik Queen got drafted, I hadn't done the part three. He was like the last scout that I did for the whole draft. And when he got drafted, I was like, man, is he actually suck? Like I was a little bit disappointing. In my notes, I say he's the most consequential prospect in the class for me. The low floor, high ceiling is the colloquial terminology, and I'm smart when I say colloquial. Um, I My focus for Derik Queen's evaluation was that he can play the five in the NBA and present the mismatch that's necessary at the mismatch that's necessary for him to be able to not really be all that good of a defender. When in almost a little bit over 350 possessions without Julian Reese versus T80 competition, which is like the top 25% of talent, team talent in college basketball. They they were a +6 net rating, which was like on par with like the best teams in the nation. This is because of a 99th percentile offense that Queen aided in massively by improving his influence on the glass. He rebounded better on both ends when Julian Reese was off the floor, which makes sense because Julian Reese is a very high level defender and rebounder, and when he's not on the floor, there would be more rebounds to caress. Also, rim finishing improved because Julian Reese also doesn't really have much of a offensive game. He would usually be found under the basket, and for Queen, having the player not standing directly under the basket for him to be able to further flex his scoring ability was beneficial for him playing as the solo big. Leaps in assist percentage were nullified by a higher. My focus for Derik Queen's evaluation was that he can play the five in the NBA and present the mismatch that's necessary at the mismatch that's necessary for him to be able to not really be all that good of a defender. When in almost a little bit over 350 possessions without Julian Reese versus T80 competition, which is like the top 25% of talent, team talent in college basketball. They they were a +6 net rating, which was like on par with like the best teams in the nation. This is because of a 99th percentile offense that Queen aided in massively by improving his influence on the glass. He rebounded better on both ends when Julian Reese was off the floor, which makes sense because Julian Reese is a very high level defender and rebounder, and when he's not on the floor, there would be more rebounds to caress. Also, rim finishing improved because Julian Reese also doesn't really have much of a offensive game. He would usually be found under the basket, and for Queen, having the player not standing directly under the basket for him to be able to further flex his scoring ability was beneficial for him playing as the solo big. Leaps in assist percentage were nullified by a higher turnover percentage, and his stocks also went down when playing as the solo big. but his play type distribution change with Reese off the floor is more important, or is just as important as his actual statistical his own personal stats. If I had to rank the importance, it would be team impact, which was like best team in the nation, or on par with the best teams in the nation when he plays a solo big. Then play type distribution, and then his own personal stats in the way that they changed in 350 possession sample size, which isn't a whole lot, but it's also not nothing, especially when trying to project a specific role in the professionals. Man, okay, yeah, I'm gonna do the lotto, and then I'll put it together, and then I'll release and then I'll do the rest. Um, the All right, cool, we got it. The difference in play type distribution is most important for Queen because when he was the solo big, Maryland's transition frequency jumped from like 40th percentile in the nation to 80th percentile. Basically, his influence on transition as a big is more akin to that of like guards historically. Most guards that you see, like really good guard prospects, their transition influence is pretty heavy, and this goes along with the ideas about Queen being like a handling .5 kind of a deal, even without the like the assist numbers that you would usually look for in a point five or a point forward. That he actually is dribbling the ball and like making reads on elite offense, on 99th percentile offenses against real competition. That's not something that can be, too understated for sure. Huge leaps in perimeter cut and transition frequency had Queen's fingerprints all over them for the team, as these quick hitting possessions saw high leverage passing volume fall heavily on him. Tre Young is I guess an example of high turnovers not being bad in short, as long as it's high leverage turnovers that's keeping like lower level playmakers from making bad reads. Queen's free throw rates, everyone else on the court's free throw rate increased when Queen was the solo big, which I think speaks to I'm not exactly sure what it speaks to. Man, I'm not on fire right now. I believe that it's a good indicator, even if it doesn't directly speak to something that I can summarize off the top of my head. I'm sure it speaks to a specific idea, though. The Murray ball frequency of the team also increased. Queen, based off of all this information, is a solo big who you play at the 5 and you attempt to maximize offensive output, as opposed to say play him at the 4 with another big and try to like play it both ways. If you're going to have Derik Queen on your team, you would say that is going all out. In a sheet where Queen's free throw percentage and free throw rate is something that usually comes with a positive offensive influence on his team, especially when this comes with the ability to actually like kind of pass and dribble the ball as well. The query is 76 free throw percentage as a freshman, over 6'9", and a 50 free throw rate. And the three most pertinent players, because they have the three highest assist percentages, is Karl-Anthony Towns, Jaren Jackson, and Kevin Love, who have all had varying degrees of positive offensive influence on their basketball teams. I think Jaren's is going to increase this season, like to the degree where the sheets might say he's a top 10 player. I think this is going to come out before I do my top 10 players podcast with Finn, but I'm going to talk about that more on that too. So if you want to catch that, then that would be cool too. And there's Derik Queen, who was drafted with the 13th pick, and that's also, it's not where I would have taken him. I would have taken someone else at that slot, but I also had him as the 13th best player in the class. No. As long as he's not actually the worst defender in basketball, which would, I think, come from like conditioning for Queen, because he did not have the best combine. But the offensive floor is high enough where playing him through the whatever struggles, I believe, will be worth it. And playing with Herb Jones is a pretty good infrastructure in the meantime. So I'm excited about Derik Queen. I don't think he sucks. I think that he is a special weapon of sorts that should be able to be tapped into at the NBA level and during his career. Because I think that he's going to be able to shoot the ball as well. I don't know if I indicated that well enough, but I don't think he's going to have any problem shooting jump shots eventually. And finally in the lottery is Carter Bryant, who I had 4th in the class. And this was honestly just as crazy. Well, no one really actually cared. After I had Maluach 1 and Flag 2, that's what all my dialogue was about. But Carter Bryant at 4 was also crazy as hell. My research, the most specific thing that I think I got kind of stuck on with Carter Bryant was that he had like the best spot up. His 3-point rate at his size and like with his frame was at 7. It's just like a 7-foot wingspan, but already 215 pounds as a wing at his size with that's almost a 40-inch vert. Like, this is legitimately a very like large and athletic, like plays big as well. No one who plays as big as he does, who with the stocks that he accumulated at Arizona as well, no one who plays as big as he does on the defensive end also has the 3-point rate that he does. And for a player who is not all that skilled on offense, his scoring diet was very assisted, like outlier assisted. He doesn't really make a lot of like play making and passing reads at all. If you're going to only do one thing, it should just be shooting, catch and shoot 3-pointers and over contest, like not even having to like swing the ball or pass it or shoot a 2-dribble pull up in the mid range. If it's all transition dunks and backdoor cuts for lobs like we've seen him do, and shooting, catch and shoot 3-pointers, he was in the 99th percentile of spot up 3-point rate in the nation last season as a freshman, and he did that while having a 7-foot wingspan and having a 39-inch vertical and weighing 215 pounds. I think that all of these things come together to put him as some proxy of the genuine 3-and-D wing, not like the fake kind that people fantasize about all day, but like genuinely someone who's going to create defensive playmaking opportunities for their team and have a strong influence in that right, while also shooting threes at volume with no trouble at all. I call him the premier big 3-and-D prospect of his generation in my notes, and that's a hefty claim. This is the second mistake that I mentioned. I attributed some of Carter Bryant's ranking this high on my board as from his defensive true shooting influence on Arizona being substantial. And that, oh man, I just noticed I didn't finish my note here. I have the sheet to do it, but I didn't. That's crazy. I might have to. I'm not going to. But Bryant's. Oh, I guess I did prove it. I didn't even notice this. Battier's heaviest RAPM influence was in defensive field goal percentage, which aligns with Bryant's 90th percentile spot up defensive points per possession, minimum 100 possessions, and his team defensive impact. What I was going to say is that his team defensive impact was like good, not great at Arizona. And I attributed it to being great, and that's how I got him this high on my board. The range for him wouldn't be higher than 4, and it would be as low as probably like 9 or 10. So like if I was gonna clean up anything on my board, I would drop Carter Bryant a few spots. Um, I also had some Johnny Furpey. Last year was a player who I ranked 18th, but if Johnny Furpey was a substantially better athlete, weighed 20 more pounds, and had a 3-inch longer wingspan, I wouldn't have ranked him fourth, but I would have ranked him higher. So, Carter Bryant, everybody who pressed me about having him this high, you were right. But he is still probably one of the premier 3-and-D wing prospects that we will see in this generation. All right, so that is the top 14 players handled on my board. I will probably record the rest. I don't know if it'll be a whole. I guess it'll be a whole new video actually. Yeah, I even if you only got through the 14 players and some of my evaluation traits and my undrafted players, I appreciate anyone who spends the time with my work. It means the most to me, and I thank you for that. 2 thumbs up.